Hi, I decided to check in and make a video. I'm trying to get in the habit again of making these very regularly as I used to churn out more content. Um, I'm going to cover a movie here, and it probably isn't going to be any great shakes as far as coverage goes. But I did want to say a few things before I get into that. So I applied at Rockfin. I registered, and then I registered for content creation, and then they wanted, a link to uh, my YouTube channel, my social media, and any pertinent works I'd done. I really only had a few political videos that I could give them the link to. So anyway, they turned me down. They said I really didn't have enough content. Didn't have any kind of following. Didn't really fit. So yeah, I was a little discouraged. So I guess I'm gonna slug it out on YouTube and maybe just occasionally still do the political ones and just, I guess, watch what I have to say. I don't know. But anyway, in the meantime, I'm still gonna be doing my usual uh, creative ones and either my creations, talking about my creations, or someone else's creations. So I just wanted to make a quick one tonight. Really, this is just a little bit of personal storytelling disguised as a Blue Review episode. So in 1986, I was hanging out a lot with this kid named JJ, and I've mentioned him quite a bit on my Flickr Street videos. He was like my best friend then. He was my best friend up until he wasn't my best friend. And then my friend who I've alluded to before, who I've been in bands with and lived with and uh, fought over women, fought over about women and all kinds of other things, worked with their magazine. We had a long tempestuous relationship for over 30 years on and off. But yeah, he was my best friend for the longest. But before him, I would say that JJ was my best friend. And that was just something that kind of happened, even though I was still naive about classism back then. And again, I've covered some of this in my early Flickr Street videos. I don't expect you to have watched them or remember them, all the minutia of the personal elements behind the scenes of creating Flickr Street and what became Flickr Street. So, to cut it short, basically, I was very attached to him, and I thought him to me, and we had a lot of creative chemistry. Our senses of humor were along the same very offbeat path, irreverent, and we liked a lot of the same music and sci-fi, fantasy, and comic books. And he got me into a few movies that I later liked because he had HBO before anyone that I hung out with. Uh, so, and his brother, his younger brother, by a few years, was also sort of a friend of mine. He kind of tagged along with us. Me and JJ went to several comic conventions together. Uh, just I could go on and on about this guy, but that was like a totally different person that I was then. Ironically, in recent years, I think mainly since I've been the last year or two, since I've been um, talking about him on the videos and reminiscing about the roots of my Flickr Street stuff, I've begun dreaming about him very regularly, and it's a bit, it's like a part of yourself that was never resolved. This person just kind of cut me out of their life. Uh, no apologies, no explanations. That kind of thing had happened to me occasionally prior to that, but this was like the most dramatic. And between that and the girl I was dating around that time, doing the same thing, within a year, I, uh, it became easier for me to do that to other people. I was never able to really let go of toxic people. I was kind of codependent, but then I became kind of cold and harsh, and I could just let somebody go like that. And to be honest, I've really kind of become like that permanently, for better or worse. I mean, it's a survival strategy. It's a way to protect yourself. Um, and the only person that I haven't been able to just let go of and just move immediately onward, for better or worse, in the last several years. Not even my ex-wife, was my ex-fiance, who I've talked about ad nauseum on here. She was the only person whose opinion of me still mattered. Uh, it matters very little now. I can't say it doesn't matter at all, but who knows what it is. So, that way lies madness, rabbit hole. And we've been down it before, you and I, on these videos. So I avoid too much lingering there. But anyway, in my earlier life, I didn't have a lot of very close friends after my friend Thomas moved away. In real life friends, I had some that I hung out with, but they were kind of transitory, and I tended to grow too attached to them, and they not to me. And that was my problem a lot in my early years with friends, and then later with girlfriends. I think it may still be a problem for me, but it's just I handle it better. I handle it differently. I'm stronger now. I don't have to rise and fall by that person's capricious treatment of me. If they decide one morning they don't want to talk to me ever again, then I'm going to move forward. And I've lost at least three very, very strong long-term male friends here in the last 2 years, since the time me and my ex-fiance split, and which did have some impact on it, sort of. And I've moved on. Only one of them I can say I do get a little. I was rather hurt that he moved on from me, and I think about him sometimes, but not that much. I mean, not that much in the sense of lamenting. My other two buddies I'd been friends with for many years, and they were their lives were going in two different directions from mine. Both of them were going in directions consumed with their families, which were rife with dysfunction and tension. And I was kind of always the fifth wheel because I no longer was married, and I was having a lot of problems of my own, and I needed their friendship, their support, and instead, which I'd gotten in the past, and instead I was getting kind of, I don't know, the amusement, like they didn't understand. Whoa, his heart's broken again, and it's like, well, not everyone's been fortunate enough to settle down like you guys, even in a tepid marriage that you've settled for. I won't settle for that, and that's not what I think I would have had with Kelly. And but apparently that's what she thought ultimately about me. Sad to say. So again, it's not always equal on both sides. Is it ever? I don't know. I don't know. These are like quandaries that just, still. I don't overthink them like I used to. I don't get lost in them like I used to. But then I'm on some psychoactive medicines that are supposed to break up those recurrent obsessive thought patterns. So they help. But not always. So my point is that JJ is a guy from that period, with first period person who really kind of hurt me in a long lasting way. But at the time, I kind of just pushed it down and went forward, like fuck him, because I was starting to gain a lot of confidence in myself, and I knew the direction I wanted to go in my life as a person, as an artist, and as a creator. And obviously, he no longer was comfortable with me. He rejected me due to our class differences, our I guess political differences. I don't know. This was back when I wasn't exactly politically radicalized, but I was anti-conservative, anti-Republican. Um, but anyway, so it severed our creative liaison, which was good because it spurred me to rethink the whole Dynamite Comics skeleton that I've been kind of trying to build on and radically rethink it and reinvent it into what has become and is now. So that was good because I thought I couldn't do it by myself. I thought I needed a collaborator, and I I uh, I don't now, So uh, the closest I'd come was, I mean, I've had two people ask me if they could work with me on Flickr Street in recent years because they were taken with the universe that I was creating. One was my friend I mentioned who recently did kind of hurt my feelings and won't talk to me anymore. And then the other was my ex-fiance. They both asked to either write and or illustrate works in my mythos for because it spurred their imaginations. They came to me with that, and of course I turned down my friend because I said, I'm just pretty much the sole writer. With Kelly, I was like, yeah, you can definitely do art in this vein, and we can talk about the ideas because she understood the root ideas of what I was doing, and I've explained that ad nauseum on videos as well. She was my number one fan and definitely my person who really truly got what I was doing on a the deep level of what I was doing, more than just the aesthetic level or just some of the messages or subtext I was putting in there. I have a couple of other friends who uh, who understand all that and appreciate it, and then some people who are starting to appreciate it when they read my stuff, but they're more drawn in by the artwork. Um, so anyway, so before all this kind of fell apart with JJ, I was a couple of years older than him. He was still in high school. I was just out of high school, and we hung out on weekends a lot. And there were two different occasions where we went to the movies. One time, I think it was just he and I don't remember how we got there. I can't remember who gave us a ride or what happened because neither of us were driving. Uh, and that's when we saw Reform Schoolgirls with Wendy O. Williams, which was really my first kind of bad movie, sleazy movie, certainly women in prison movie in a movie theater. So that was kind of, I guess, a landmark for me. I think it would have made a bigger impact if I'd liked the movie better, or if it had just been a better movie, a more definitive movie in that vein. But it is in that vein, and certainly a vein that I've tapped since then and enjoyed to varying degrees. Uh, so that was pretty crazy. That was an R-rated movie, and he wasn't old enough to see R-rated movies quite yet, I don't think. I was just barely. Well, no, I was 17. Yeah, I was right. I was 18. So uh, I could go see porno movies, and I did go see my first porno movie that year, Viva Vanessa with Vanessa Del Rio, when they were still, on film in a theater. So on another occasion, we went, and I think we dragged along his younger brother that I mentioned earlier, and we went to see Transformers the movie, and it was 1986, and it was, I think, opening night. We went to this place called Charlottetown Mall, which doesn't exist anymore. Used to host for several years the Rocky Horror Picture Show, midnight movies, midnight floor show, and had several friends who were engaged in that. Jeff, what's his name? Jeremy, and I met Jeremy uh, I met Jeremy in high school, and then we became friends when I worked at Harris Teeter with him. But he was like the Frankenfurter. He played Frankenfurter in the floor show a lot, and he introduced me to a girl who became kind of my first sort of serious girlfriend. She was always playing Magenta. My friend I've mentioned before, the late Christopher Pack, he really didn't play much. He just kind of went there and danced and sung to the songs and caused havoc. My friend Mitchell Francis, good friend of mine on Facebook still. He was involved in that scene. It was weird. I didn't like the movie, and I I couldn't really get much out of the movie with the floor show going, but ultimately I became a huge fan and lover of Rocky Horror and of Shock Treatment, the sequel. Uh, and I don't really care about that scene or any of those people really. I mean, a few that I still talk to, like I said, but they aren't as obsessive about it as they used to be, like Mitch and Jeremy. But those other people who are still obsessed, 30, 35 years later, I've checked out their pages. I've seen them at conventions, the convention I used to go to with my wife, and it doesn't seem like they've much grown as people in all that time, and don't really care. So they don't really interest me. They seem to be in a permanent arrested development. So it doesn't matter. We could chit chat about, Richard O'Brien's songwriting and such, but we couldn't hang out, and that's fine. I shouldn't have been hanging out with the then girlfriend when I was, but I was a virgin, and she was going to remedy that and did. And you become attached when you have no experience, and you're sensitive and you're lonely. You make foolish decisions, and when you're not sure of your own artistic path, you're an artistic person, but you're trying to be open-minded, but really you're kind of letting in a lot of toxic things in an effort to expand. You haven't quite hit the things that really resonate with you. So anyway, prior to that period, a couple of years before that, me and JJ went to see Transformers, the movie, on opening night. And back then they had these, for many years, they had these corny ads. I can't remember which, General Cinema, one of the major cinema chains. I've kind of lost track of what there are. Eastern Federal, I don't know, AMC. But there was two ads they would always play before these movies during that period. And one was, we love babies. And you would have a crying baby, but please, before the movie begins, please take care of your baby and, make sure that they're, settled down and whatever. Take them to the lobby if you need to. Like everything will be okay, but you just need to, do your parental duty. Set in a real jovial fashion. And then another one was like, it was like spaceship. It was like these cups, like cups of soda and like trays of food and popcorn boxes, and they were like spaceships, and they were heading like towards this giant dock, like an airlock, like in Battlestar Galactica, the original. And then when they went in there, they would zap, and so it was like, discard your food and beverages in the receptacles provided you, and it kind of was trying to be this futuristic, portentous, voice, and you go in there and go zap. So my friend JJ, he made up a commercial. He said they should fuse the two commercials together and say, we love babies, but crying babies must be deposited in the proper receptacles and disposed of before the show. I still think that's kind of funny. Maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe I'm in Arrested Development, but I do think it's funny. So anyway, not long ago, I found out that in the Fathom Events series of re-releases of movies theatrically, nationally, the partners a lot with AMC theaters. They were, since COVID, as theaters have begun opening up again, albeit under limited circumstances, they were going to begin these events. Now, in the past, I've seen a few of them, the Fathom Events re-releases in theaters. I saw Purple Rain after Prince died. I saw Planet of the Apes with my good friend Tim McLean, and the first time I'd ever seen that in the theater. Great experience. And there were many that I planned to see and just never got around to it. Probably one or two others I'm not remembering, but they had a great slate from like 2016 to 2018-ish. Then they started showing a lot of things I wasn't as interested in, but I was always kind of keeping my own eye on it, and then the whole theatrical experience, fell apart. So now they're doing events again, and they'll play them at select theaters for limited times. So this particular one came up, and it was going to be Transformers the movie, the 35th anniversary theatrical re-release, and it was going to have two showings at the theater near my house, which is an AMC Carolina Pavilion, a 22 screen multiplex. And I've seen a lot of movies there in the last several years, even some kind of off the beaten track films. Though more of those I've seen at a place called Regal, which actually is next to where I work now. So, but both of them are convenient, obviously for different reasons. One next to my work, one next about a mile from my house. So I bought this ticket. It was like $12, and I really couldn't afford it. And I was like, well, there goes seeing Shang-Chi, which I was mulling over, and finally I had decided I will not go see it. Another video, another story. But in any case, I bought the ticket, and then I'm glad I did then, because I didn't really have much money this week to spend a little bit extra money. And the day came, I almost forgot about it, so I wasn't feeling particularly well earlier today. But I got my head together, and I went on down the street, and I did spend a little money on a soda and a snack, and I was in this theater again, and I had my favorite seat. G6 is all the way up in the balcony, and I love it when I'm all the way up there, especially when it's just me. So I was hoping there weren't going to be many people there, but there actually were 20. I counted 20 people besides myself as they came in, but I was the first one in there. There were people next to me who were, they were polite. They were old school kind of Transformer geeks, and then there was another couple a little down the way, and then another guy who said he'd always wanted to see it. He was too young to see it the first time around. The guy immediately to my left said that he had seen it the first time around and had cried when Optimus Prime died. Oh, spoilers. So I thought I'd be a little frustrated with, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people on my sacred, holy balcony area, but it was fine. It was quiet. There were one smallish child and one very small child, but the mom kept it under wraps. He didn't burst into tears, I don't think, when Optimus died. I say I don't think because that's when I had to go to the restroom, was during that scene. I didn't intend it that way. It just worked out that way. I kind of needed to wake up a little. I was starting to kind of not doze off, but starting to kind of zone out. Like I was kind of into the movie, and I kind of wasn't connecting with it like I thought I would, because I really liked it when I saw it in the theater. I liked it because I had watched the series when I was in high school, and I was probably older than most of the fans of the show. I mean, like I said, my friend JJ, he was in junior high then. He was probably closer to the target age or slightly older. And of course, Marvel was doing comic books of it then. So those of us that collected comics knew what it was about. My aforementioned friend Christopher actually collected the toys, and he thought they were very cool. So, it was kind of on the periphery of things for me, but not I wasn't buying the toys. I wasn't buying the Marvel comics. And I finally did start watching the cartoon, and I enjoyed it. It's kind of funny, kind of creative at times. And so me and JJ decided to check this thing out, and we kind of like made fun of it throughout the movie or laughed about it. There's a lot of goofy things in it, but it was in good nature. I mean, and one thing that struck me then, which I didn't fully remember until now, I was afraid I was maybe romanticizing it. But one thing that struck me then was how it kind of, not only did it take the animation to the next level, as in it didn't just take the Japanese designs and Japanese style of animation and kind of dumb them down, simplify them for the syndicated cartoons the way the American Transformers show was presented, but it brought them back up to the level of cinematic, Japanese anime in Japan, and that a really, really strong graphics, strong effects, and visuals, and a lot of motion, a lot of very kinetic, all the kinds of things that we now take for granted in manga and anime. in anime in general, and everything that's been influenced by it. You kind of see it, you kind of know when you see it now. It's become imprinted into the culture. And arguably one of the first things that imprinted it deeply into the culture in America was the film Akira. Akira came out 2 years after Transformers the movie. Akira is much more wholly a Japanese film. Transformers is like an international co-production. A lot of Japanese crew members, but North American voice talents, including some big stars. A lot of people who worked. I realized this reading the credits at the end. A lot of people who worked on the behind-the-scenes art and design work were comic book veterans. I noticed that Mike Sekowsky, who had done Justice League back in the day, Rico Revel, who was one of the, if I'm correct, one of the Filipino wave of artists, Romeo Tanghal, who at that time was the inker of George Perez on the really hot New Teen Titans. And of course, voice talents, well-known voice talents, Scatman Crothers, Leonard Nimoy, Orson Welles, believe it or not, Robert Stack. I'm forgetting a whole bunch of other ones, but those are kind of the big ones, the draws, I guess. So it had a certain gravitas or weight or legitimacy theatrically, and I think they were going for, without going too adult, they were going for the same general kind of audience that went to see Heavy Metal, the Heavy Metal movie, or maybe some of Ralph Bakshi's movies, but not exactly, not that same vibe, but that same demand for, more sophisticated animation. I guess in Bakshi's case, yeah, stuff like Fire and Ice and certainly Lord of the Rings, the Flash Gordon Saturday morning cartoon that used a lot of rotoscoping, and definitely, like I said, the Heavy Metal movie. And I'm forgetting, there's probably another animated film from that period that I'm forgetting that's important. But anyway, they were kind of cresting on that and on the wave of the Japanese, the anime starting to come to the surface in America on tape, subtitled and dubbed by people. And so it kind of hit all these areas at once. And the fact it was Transformers, it was highly visible for being a, world famous best-selling cartoon and a hit comic book and toy line. And so it was a hit, but it was like a subversive hit in that it did take the graphic level to graphic aspects to a whole nother level. That was impressive. And also it was like that was symbolized in the story. It was like a passing of the torch because, the leaders of the Autobots and the Decepticons, the good and bad Transformers robots, they died. They died and either supplanted, replaced, or reborn, depending on the occasion, on the scenario. So it was kind of like some of the second stringer Transformers from the show got into more prominent roles. Some of them, not really sure why, like me, Grimlock, of the Dinobots. That was just, I guess, physical comedy, really. But other characters kind of ascended. Nobody that's super popular now, like Bumblebee or whatever in these later movies. But to be honest, the two main guys who were the main heroes, right now my brain's blanking on it. I saw the movie like an hour and a half ago. Everyone would know them, and they completely scoff at me. I remember Jazz. He was a major character, voiced by Scatman Crothers. There was this annoying human kid and his father, and that I never really got the point of that storyline subplot. It was obviously continued from the accretion of incidences in the Cybertron War that took place over the course of the animated series that we saw in America. So you kind of had to be familiar with that to see what was happening, to appreciate it. Now, at the time, I was, and so yes, I did know, wow, okay, they're killing Optimus Prime, they're killing his enemy Megatron, they're killing Starscream, Megatron's second in command, they're killing some others and then bringing some new ones in and rebirthing Megatron as Galvatron, on Ultra Magnus or whatever his name is that name Ultra Magnus? Super Magnus, Ultra Magnus, Robert Stack's character. He ascended to leadership of the Autobots. He dies and kind of comes back. It turns out his death was greatly exaggerated. But there's a lot of funkier elements, more cosmic elements, like with Unicron and voiced by Orson Welles, this kind of planet-devouring planet metal machine, not metal machine music, metal machine thing that eventually transforms into a humanoid, demonic-looking being. And he had resurrected Megatron as Galvatron, voiced by Leonard Nimoy, and has his agent, and they were going to end the Cybertron war once for all by annihilating the Transformers, and by extension, the Autobots and the Autobots, yes, and by extension, the Dinobots and their other allies, like the annoying human characters. There was a female Transformer, predominantly pink color. I can't remember her name either. She was a major character, and they even hinted at some kind of romance between her and the green guy, whose name I can't remember. So sorry about the bad, I should have been taking notes, but my point is that what I rediscovered was that yes, this is what was being done. It was taken to another level visually and story-wise by having like characters that die and emotional connections. Of course, a lot of humor and a lot of transforming cars, but a lot more alien planets and wild cybernetic design creatures. A lot more imaginative stuff that's really core anime kind of things that you're used to seeing in quality anime. Very imaginative stuff that broke out of just the basic, here's some robots fighting and they turn into cars. It was a lot more galactic, a lot more cosmic. It had more of a sweep to it. It had a really beautiful, the backgrounds were painted really beautifully. The energy effects were, the lighting was great, just the way you've come to see in anime for many years now, which was not really done in any animation before that. But it still had humor, but it had character-oriented humor. It was a good, strong piece. It was a good, strong transitional piece, story-wise, but also tonally. And when I saw it in 1986, I thought, so what next? Is there going to be a new TV series or a movie series with this new status quo? And to be honest, I kind of lost track and frankly, interest shortly after that, and I've never really regained it. So this is really more of a nostalgic thing, but it was good to rediscover those things. Another thing they threw in there to give it kind of an edge, like they used the word shit once, and they used sexy once. Sexy. That was a provocative word for a kid's cartoon. So it had a PG rating. And it had a slightly darker tone, and I guess heavy with the death of Optimus Prime. The other thing was the soundtrack, and a lot of it was very 80s, and some of it was American stuff. It was stuff from really kind of bad sounding pop metal, hair metal bands, most of which, other than Lion, who plays on it, never really broke in any way over here. And some of it was just almost cheesy kind of new wave pop, like really cheesy. I mean, in other words, and I wondered if that was also piggybacking on the idea of heavy metal, the movie, trying to, spice up the action scenes with this kind of blaring metal guitars and big pounding drum machine beats and, wild vocals and really kind of cheesy lyrics. And that made me, it taught me something, because the signature song here they use a couple of times in the movie, You Got the Touch, written by this guy named Stan Bush, I think. I don't know who that is. That's a real song, and that was the song back then. I mean, in other words, I saw that song in this movie in 1986. Totally forgot about it. And so when I watched Boogie Nights for the first time, I assumed that it was a song that John C. Reilly and Mark Wahlberg had written in character as a spoof of the kind of 80s songs that were popular then. And so it was hilarious. And now I'm finding it was a real, like, serious, po-faced, real, I mean, playing a straight song in this cartoon. And oh my God, I don't know. I had the strongest reaction to that to anybody in the theater. I don't know. I guess they just thought, yeah, I got the touch, man. I mean, maybe none of them had seen Boogie Nights. Or maybe they saw Boogie Nights and they were like, that's a shitty cover of that Transformers movie, man. But it wasn't supposed to be a cover with the movie. In the movie, it was something that Riley's character, I'm forgetting his name. There's Dirk Diggler and his buddy, whatever, wrote the music for. So, so that was kind of a revelation. So I chuckled through a lot of the music, and it was just really over the top. But a lot of it was also like the Japanese music of that period, pop music, a lot of which wasn't anime. Which was kind of a combination of metal and synth pop and very florid and over the top kind of stuff, melodramatic. I found a lot of these kind of soundtracks on YouTube, and it's fascinating. And I mean, the whole Japanese rock and popular music scene, and even more the underground and experimental scenes, is a bottomless well. The phrase I've used before to describe, I guess, Western rock and jazz and things like that. But it's just as true there. It's a bottomless well too. So there were a ton of these kind of bands, and some of them were metal bands, some of them were new wave bands. A lot of them dressed really crazy. It's Japan. I mean, it was just excess, and this was the '80s. I'm almost surprised Loudness didn't make it onto the soundtrack. I actually listened to them back in the '80s. They were a Japanese metal band, and they're still together through many changes and permutations. So yeah, this movie was kind of cool. After I got a refill on my soda and used the bathroom, I was feeling it a lot more, and I enjoyed it all the way to the end. I think it's kind of unique. It's kind of an anomaly. I would like to read more about it and the storyline and get the characters' names right sometime, and eventually collect it and have it on Blu-ray in my library. It was just a nostalgic thing from my youth in the '80s, not to the level of Purple Rain or Flash Gordon or anything of that nature. That I had very strong emotional theatrical experiences with. But it was like a footnote, and it was also, like I said, a time when I had a certain lightness in my life, a certain innocence, and a best friend that I could go and go on these crazy adventures with, and as we used to put it, trip out, just act crazy. And that was kind of the times, and I've talked about that period, roughly, especially 1986 to 1988. Especially in relation to Flicker Street. I have the Flicker Street arc, 1987, some of which was written back in 1987. And it takes place from 1986 to 1988. And it kind of encapsulates, the subtext encapsulates how I feel about that era. The storytelling is kind of a legacy of what happened to me in those years, which was that I started to tap into something else creatively, and I started writing differently. And I've been on that path ever since, growing and changing, but continuing to channel things more than contrive them. And I guess this almost is like a mystical, alchemical process. I've talked about this before. I'm sorry if it sounds highfalutin, but it's the way that I intuit these stories in this world. A Flicker Street is this analogical universe. And so yeah, this original movie came out at a nexus point in my life in those different levels. And so I decided I would honor that tonight and just have some fun and get back to the movie theater. And I don't know when I'll go next. My friend Tim Tolbert is spurring me to see Shang-Chi in the theater. I'm trying to work it around my work schedule. But when I do, I will definitely do a full review. And I'll do another Blue review coming up because I whole lot of other movies I've watched I want to talk about. So thanks a lot, and thanks for the kind comments on the last video about Candyman and Pyewacket, etc. Please subscribe. Please share. Comment if you'd like. Get the word out. I really need to expand this channel and expand my base so that I can get on Rockfin. No, I'm kidding. Anyway, everybody,